this moment, I think now more than ever, businesses have a critical role to play. They have access to opportunity that is needed for individuals and communities throughout Central New York and around the state and around the country. So I think this is a critically important conversation. I'm also really excited about our panel today because it really does represent a new generation of leadership in our community. And I've been around long enough to remember once upon a time another youth leadership organization that was formed in Central New York called 40 Below. I was really proud of the role that we played in that moment to mobilize this useful energy in Central New York and try to drive new conversations and take our community in a different direction. And I'm really excited about the fact that today we're joined by panelists representing Generation Next, who are themselves picking up the mantle of leadership in this critical moment and looking to help lead all of us in new and more equitable and inclusive directions. So I'm going to stop there, turn the program over to our very own Liza Simide, who's going to moderate our discussion today. Liza, the program's all yours.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you everyone for coming to our event today. We're very excited. We have a group of panelists that are absolute rock stars in our community and are going to be sharing some of their experiences, both personal and in business. And first of all, my name is Liza Simide, like Rob mentioned, and I am the Syracuse Surge Workforce Manager for CenterState CEO. Before we start, I want to set some ground rules. Everyone that comes in will be muted. And there will be a chance for you to ask questions through the chat, and they will be answered at the end of our discussion. So please feel free to throw in your questions in the chat. We will get to them towards the end of our panel discussion. Another thing, we are recording this webinar, just to let you know, and at the end of the program, we'll put it up on our website and on YouTube for you guys to share it with other colleagues that couldn't make it today. And without further ado, I want to introduce our panel today. Let's start with Amid. If you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself, tell us who you are, name, title, and describe your leadership in the community.
Thank you, Liza. My name is Amid Turner. I am the Chapter Executive Director for Say Yes to Education in Syracuse. Say Yes to Education is a nonprofit scholarship foundation. We partner with communities to help drive student performance, to increase high school graduation, to increase high school to college matriculation, and to increase college completion. And I am happy to be here with you all.
We're excited to have you, Amid. Next, I want to turn it over to Arel.
What's going on, everybody? Arel Moody here, president of an organization called Reed Oak. We have a catalog of different businesses and services that we offer. Primarily, it is a lot in the professional speaking, where we do leadership training, speaking for youth, for businesses, and also do online training to help people create online courses and get their message out to people using the power of the internet. So it's been a lot of fun to do this work, and I'm really big in the power of entrepreneurship and empowering people to be able to take what's in their mind, change their perspective, and either do that within their current organization and grow, or to create their own thing and grow that. And I think if we empower folks economically, whether it's through being entrepreneurial within their particular company or being an entrepreneur themselves, everybody wins. So excited to have this conversation and excited to be a part of this great group of panelists.
Thank you, Arel. I am going to pass it over to my colleague, Cal.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cal Quarters. I'm the manager of neighborhood economic development for CenterState CEO. My role is focused on the south side of Syracuse in a neighborhood that's just south of downtown, and it's been coined the Southeast Gateway. And I'm focused on supporting and collaborating with businesses and organizations in that neighborhood, but also focused on both real estate and business development. So on the real estate side of things, focused on supporting or identifying underutilized and vacant lots and vacant buildings, and working with individuals who have plans for redevelopment of those sites. but also on the business development side of things, working with individuals in that neighborhood who have businesses and have plans for expansion or are looking to start a business, and businesses who want to come into the neighborhood as well, support them in similar capacities. I'm always having conversations in the community, and we have an emphasis or looking to support everyone who have those plans for development and that vision for succeeding in this neighborhood, but also an emphasis on supporting the Black and Brown community as well.
Thank you, Cal. Next up, we have Chayla Surratt.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chayla Surratt. I am the communications coordinator at Lightwork and Urban Video Project. We are part of Syracuse University and support emerging and underrepresented artists working specifically in the field of photography. We do that through exhibitions, and we also do that through some of the publications that we distribute. I have the pleasure of also serving on several boards here, the Everson Community Folk Arts Center, and also I'm the co-founder of the Black Leadership Coalition, which is focused on looking at Black voters, Black and Brown voters, and making sure that those who want to be candidates or those who want to campaign and speak to the Black community are speaking to our concerns specifically.
Thank you, Chayla. And last but not least, Lakey Hill.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lakey Hill. I'm the Community Outreach and Diversity Coordinator for Huber Brewer Construction here in Syracuse, New York. We are one of the longest standing firms in the Central New York area, we're 148 years old. So we've been here a really long time, a lot of development around the community as well. My role is pretty much a dual. So on the community outreach side, it's my job to go out into the community, connect with them, engage our employees with community partners, giving services, that sort of thing, which is really great and always fun. And on the diversity side, a lot of my outreach is around the utilization on our projects for minority and women-owned businesses.
Thank you, Lakey. And to get this conversation started, I want to frame our conversation in diversity and equity. There is a difference between those two. And all your answers, panelists, I want you to answer with that frame in mind. There's diversity and inclusion and how those two work together. So I want to turn it over to Arel and ask you, why is this so critical now more than ever to lead and act in this moment?
Yeah, so I created a chart. I'm really excited about this. I have a whiteboard, so I want to use my whiteboard. Hopefully this all is visually makes sense to everyone. So this is my first whiteboard via Zoom. So you will all give me feedback if this went well, if this was a miserable fail. But nonetheless, when I think about the types of people that typically exist in any situation, you've got 4 quadrants, right? So we'll call it first quadrant, second, third, and fourth quadrant, right? This first quadrant, this is kind of like preaching to the choir. These are people who say, look, it makes perfect sense. Diversity, inclusion, equity, it's beneficial, it's helpful, I'm all in, you know? So this one is all good. You know, these are the people, it's very easy. Then with your second quadrant of humans, these are the people who believe it's important, but they may not be doing anything. These are the individuals who I would say are responding very well to the idea that silence is violence, right? So they're saying, hey, look, we have an opportunity to make sure that people do well. We understand these systemic challenges that are actually in place, and they can be swayed to see why it's important. So this is pretty good. Now over here, these are the people who they're never going to care. They're never going to like us. They're never going to care about equity. They have certain viewpoints that are very, very difficult to unearth in this particular lifetime for them, right? Their children totally can be changed. But there's this third quadrant that I'm most fascinated with, which are the group that I could change, I could see this side of it, and I could go over here. I could be swayed, but I'm definitely not far over here. I think right now, we're seeing the biggest change in this group. We're seeing the biggest change in this third quadrant that could totally not care, that could totally move into a direction where they don't care, or could be swayed into an opinion where they can be influenced and then eventually join, which seems like the most ridiculous argument in the world, that we should care about people who are Black and brown as equals. It's the same way I struggle and I get a little angry. I'm gonna get on a soapbox and let me get off it. But like the fact that we have to still have conversations about women being paid and treated the same as men, the fact that we have to have conversations about Black and brown people's lives mattering, it's perplexing to me that it's there. But if it's there, it's clearly important, it needs to be addressed, and my mindset might see it one way. But if we take action now, I think this third quadrant of people who have influence, who have power, but aren't directly impacted by a particular movement, they will say, you know what, maybe I should care. And then the rising tide lifts all boats. So I think right now, we've never had a period in the history of society where that third quadrant of people can be made aware and made impacted. And if we look at what's happening, in my short time on this earth, I've seen many protests, but I've never seen so much change happen as what's happening right now. So I think it's never been more important, because if we do care about change, the same way in the 60s and the civil rights era, there was incredible movement that happened. I wasn't alive for it, but that same type of power is happening now. And I think the history books will look back at this moment and say, did we do what we were supposed to do, or did we fail? And it's all in our responsibility to not fail to the entire, literally our entire society. Each person makes up that society.
Thank you, Aurel. I want to ask the same question to Chayla. You kind of have a different perspective with arts and culture. Tell me a little bit about why it's so important to act now. The time is now.
Yeah, well, the time is now, I think, too, and it's interesting because I echo some of Aurel's frustration, because I think that, I come to this with an arts and culture and equity perspective. And I know that as our city, I mean, we're talking about, why this moment, why particularly in our city is this moment so important. And I think it's because as we have evolved and we are really beginning to have conversations about having conversations about economic equity, and really kind of looking back at what happened in the 15th ward and looking at some other things that have happened in terms of the disparities that have affected Black and brown people in this community, the frustration that arises for me is that part of having a vibrant city is having vibrant and diverse and inclusive and intersectional, all the words, arts and culture. So I wonder sometimes where those conversations are happening, at looking at where those disparities manifest in terms of making sure there's equity in terms of distribution of dollars to our communities that are Black and brown, so that as we reimagine, what the core, particularly of our city, will look like, to make sure that those spaces are diverse.
Thanks, Chayla. Turning it over to Lakey. You, of course, bring another perspective to the world of construction and activism. Why is it so important right now?
Well, echoing against Shayla and Aurel, in addition to their perspectives, I think if not now, never. I think that over the last 20 years and in the last 7 years of my activism, I haven't seen anything like this ever in my lifetime, right? Of where now we're talking about Black American lives specifically. Usually when we're thinking about systemic racism and we're talking about diversity, which is not necessarily about Blackness. I want to make that clear. When we talk, first I would like to just frame that diversity is not about race. Diversity is about culture, it's about thought, it's about disabilities, it's about sexuality, it's about a number of things. So I want to put that out there first. But in context of what's happening right now, and the focus being on Black American lives, when, right? And the fact that not only Black America is speaking out, but you have white America, you have other brown parts of America, you have the world now saying that this is wrong, right? So when you have a body of people, right, with these voices behind you, the time is definitely now, because when will it happen again? And in this moment, you see a lot of reformation taking place. You see CenterState, somebody as powerful and wonderful like CenterState, having this type of dialogue and conversation, bringing these dialogues to the table to encourage other businesses to think about, you know, the culture of their spaces and how they diversify their workforce. So to me, it's important because it's going to really shift and change the world in America in the direction of where it's supposed to be. And in Central New York, with the Central New York Rising and the revitalization and the coming of Amazon, we are the place in this country where it's happening. We can literally be an example of what the rest of the country could be and what the rest of the workforce could look like for businesses and everywhere else. So it's about opportunity as well. The opportunity is here, so. I'm just so excited about it. I get excited thinking about it, even though it's a tough conversation. I just kind of have this bird's view vision about what can take place, and knowing and seeing the leadership and the expansion of companies like Huber Brewer, CenterState, SGTR, all these organizations are stepping up, you know, taking that leg up and creating a pathway to make this happen. So I think it's great.
Thank you, Lakey. Amid, I am looking at you, and I want you to share a little bit from your perspective why it's so critical and what you're seeing in your industry of education.
Yes, so I think right now what we have is a unique set of circumstances all converging at once that is highlighting all of the inequities happening right now. So in this environment with COVID and the effects it's having on education, it's really, I mean, these issues of equity have always been there, but now they're being highlighted. We know that there's been a disparity in how education is funded. We know that there's a disparity in how the system of education, we already know that stuff. So we're in a very, very unique situation where we have an opportunity to really exploit those and have conversations about it and address them and emerge from the environment we're in right now with COVID-19 to something new and prosperous. If you look at the history of the United States, we were able to emerge from World War I with new and innovative ways of doing things. In the environment we're in right now, where information is readily available, videos are everywhere, we can now use that to our advantage, right? So we're using it to highlight things that are going on, and we can now use that to propel the community forward. Some of the stuff that Lakey talked about with all of the different things happening in the community right now, I think we're poised to take advantage of that stuff and really be committed to it. Something that we all know is that results don't happen overnight or in 1 year or 2 or 3. But I think right now we can all commit ourselves to saying we are going to make a very concerted effort to lift the entire region, more specifically our urban communities. And we know that if we do that through a myriad of initiatives, programs, and activities, which include primarily for me education, we know that if we're able to do that, we will lift this region, and I think we can be a model for the rest of the state and probably the rest of the country.
Thank you, Amid. So I'm going back to you, Lakey, and I want to ask you, how can the business community take a more active role in elevating inclusive spaces for talent?
Sure. I would like to start with the youth. Getting in early, making partnerships with education spaces like Syracuse City School District, particularly. They have a CTE for construction, in the perspective of construction, they have a CTE program where just before COVID, we were looking into thinking about how we can partner with that program and bring some of the young people into our spaces, and then talking to some of our peers in construction about doing the same thing, because it's not just about us, it's about the industry as a whole in Central New York. But encouraging them to gain and garner interest in not only trades, but looking at construction management. It wasn't until I got involved with a construction management company that I realized there's so many facets and arms to construction versus just the labor piece, right? And being an entrepreneur for it. But there's accounting, there's the technical assistance and the administrative side. There's so many endless possibilities in this space to really shift and change the culture and the I'll use a very simple word, the culture and the history of construction and diversifying its space. So for me, it's about starting with young people and young adults, creating internship programs within your business and your companies, and creating that pipeline and bringing people in that way. And then also, don't be afraid to create committees and task force within your organization and putting your employees on those committees from an entry level. Don't forget about the people in the beginning that really has the first connection with your consumers, right? Be inclusive, entry level, mid-level, and senior level when you're creating these spaces. Then you'll have a diverse voice at the table and thinking about what that would look like. But it should never just be the top.
Thank you, Lakia. Throwing it over to Cal. Why is it so important for businesses to play this role?
Oh man, I think for a number of different reasons. So I think Lakia really hit it on the head there. I think the business community, well, for me, I think education and economics are vital to a person's quality of life. I think the business community can have roadblocks and can be a gatekeeper when it comes to the economic route. So if the business community is able to break down some of those barriers and allow opportunity to be opened for the Black and brown community, in comparison to their white counterparts where they have that opportunity, I think it would just add so much value to that person's quality of life. And it's more than just getting that person in the door, but it's that person being able to add value to the organization, to be able to feel and see that they have opportunity to grow in position and title, but also in salary and income. And then that would just allow that person to provide for their family. That would allow for that person to have opportunities to create generational wealth for themselves and their family. That would allow that person to be an active player in society, paying taxes and spending money in the income. And as Aurel mentioned, that whole notion of rising the tide, raising all the boats and all the ships, like that is a demonstration of that. So it's really incumbent on the business community to, I would suggest, to reflect on their organizations, to educate themselves on the issues of racial inequities, to understand where they are, where the business community and business leaders fit into that, and then how they can play into the solution. And I guess the final thing I'd add is that this civil rights movement that we're seeing right now is huge. We're seeing huge companies making statements. We're seeing political figures making huge statements, but the issues will still be there, but it won't always be at the forefront. We're seeing people with their technology and social media being able to be journalists on their own and going viral at the drop of a hat. So I really just think that it's incumbent on us to implement policies and procedures now and really capture this moment now. So when it's not in the forefront, but still just as prevalent, we're able to capture that.
Thank you, Cal. Chayla, how do we ensure we move towards equity? You mentioned you're on a couple of boards. How do we move towards equity in this space?
Well, I mean, I think I want to echo some of the things that Cal said and some of the other things that have been said by the panelists today, and also some of the beginning conversations of making sure we're looking at diversity and inclusion, right? And also making sure we're not tokenizing people, right? I think too often we're talking about diversity, they get one person, be they differently able, Black, brown, et cetera, and they believe that they have now reached the promised land in terms of understanding, and not also thinking about we are not a monolith. So you need to make sure, and I should also say, and I said this before in another meeting, that not asking that person to also whittle their own chair, right? That the realities are is to make sure they have all the resources when you're pulling up and expanding that table and make sure they have all the resources and support, and also having a space where indeed they feel that they can speak. Too often I've been in situations where someone's presence doesn't mean they necessarily have a voice. So I believe someone already said here is making sure that your institutional culture is one where people actually feel supported in dissent, supported in saying, I think that there's something wrong here, even if it means circling back on things that will cause the organization to have to completely revamp. So I think that those things are very important. And I think too, it's really, someone spoke to this particular moment and kind of civil unrest and things that we're seeing, is to dare to be uncomfortable. I mean, I know in our country that we have certain etiquettes and decorum within our businesses about things we should and shouldn't say. But I think, unfortunately, we have arrived at this moment because we have been silent. So I think that those things would be key. And I also want to just circle back too, in terms of what would make our city vibrant, is that I've had the opportunity to sit down with a lot of different people who are in positions to hire. And I will say, I think that Syracuse is poised to offer the salary, to offer the benefits, to offer the diversity of jobs. But young people, if we are going to attract them, again, I'm going to get on my soapbox, which is culture and equity, arts and culture. And so we need to be able to compete with some larger cities to make sure that that nightlife and those other things that people are looking for, the word quality of life was used here. So I think that we're not making sure, and I'll make the point here, that in terms of arts and cultural institutions here, there's not a singular Black or brown arts and cultural institution here that is not tethered to higher education. So these are the kind of things that we need to begin to look at in our city.
Thank you, Shayla. Arel, how can business leaders change their perspective and start striving to become champions in terms of diversity and inclusion here in our community?
Yeah, thanks. A great question. The biggest thing that I think strikes me is there's an old idea within the personal development world of, do we have an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset? And what typically happens is when someone thinks there's perspectives, right? So going back to this quadrant, someone might look at diversity and equity over here as, oh, that's abundance. We're getting more diverse opinions. That's going to help us. But folks that are more on the latter half of that might say, oh, I have to give up something to get that. So there may be a, say, white male who I believe is a qualified candidate. So I have to give up a really good candidate so that I can get someone else for the sake of diversity. I'm losing something. That's not good. I think that's wrong. And let's delve into why that is so wrong. So, I don't think anyone would ever argue, hey, give someone a job who is unqualified for it. And I would personally never advocate for that. But there are an incredible amount of opportunities that I think all of us, if we look into our lives, we were given when maybe we didn't necessarily think that we should apply for it or that we qualified for it. At some point, someone says, I see potential in this person, I'm willing to make a risk. And almost all of us have impacted our personal lives and professional lives at a high level. So when I look at the decisions that people are making, one, you have to say, am I making this decision from a scarcity mindset that says, oh, if I make this decision, I therefore have to give something up. But that same argument can be made that by adding it, it's actually an abundant mindset because we're getting so much more. We're getting to have an incredible idea of what other people think. If you have incestuous thinking and you have one people with one group who think one way, there is no innovation, there is no growth, there is no opportunity for people to see things in a new light. So I would encourage everyone, when you're looking at either your board, how diverse is your board? I think a very simple answer is, if you serve the Syracuse community, how much does your board reflect the population that you're serving? And if not, that's a great opportunity for you to say, well, let's get out of maybe some incestuous thinking because we're keeping it in a certain good old boys club, and give a chance. Now, if someone gets a chance and they don't earn their stripes, like they get the boot like everyone else does. But that opportunity, I think, is where the abundance mindset needs to come in. If you have a vendor list and you're like, hey, this vendor looks like they're a great option, and this vendor looks like they're a great option, give someone a chance, and you might have some successes, and you're gonna have some failures. You're just gonna, things aren't always gonna go right. But if you're looking for confirmation bias, that, oh, I gave a person a chance, it didn't work, therefore it is scarcity, now I'm going to go back to what I've been doing. I would argue that anyone who's grown has never actually maintained that mindset. But if your mindset is, this is great, this is helpful, this will grow, and I'm willing to know along the process there'll be ups and downs, then I think we're going to see businesses who are including people in the board, including different vendors, including, servicing a different client base. Like, is your marketing advertising going to other people? And I think when people start realizing, oh man, this is working really well, I'm getting a lot of great opportunities, then I think people will follow suit, and it won't be so, whether strange or different or unique, it'll just be normal. And I think if anything, I would love for, when I'm talking to my grandchildren, God willingly, one day, and they're asking me about that great social movement that happened in the year 2020 and beyond, what did you gain most from it? I would say, well, I would like to say what I gained most is something that may have seemed out of the normal to you, my grandson or granddaughter, is totally normal. And I think that's the most beautiful place we can get to.
Thank you, Arel. I just want to remind our viewers that you can ask questions, just drop them in the chat. We will get to them very soon. Amit, I want to come back to you, and I want to ask you, how do we create an equitable paths to education, and what does it mean for our community?
Wow, that's a layered question. I think first and foremost, we have to look at the system of education and how resources are allocated, right? We know that there's a disparity there. And, as a local community, we could just look at that and make decisions about what we want to do. Secondly, I think education is a very good indicator in quality of life. But I also, Kayla, all right, sorry, brought up a really good point in looking at other indicators, right? So I believe firmly, deeply within my heart that education has and continues to change the world. Without education, we wouldn't be where we are right now. But I think as a community, we could look at education as an indicator, but we could also look at some other things as indicators for quality of life. And I'm from Syracuse, I'm born and raised. And when Chayla brought up the point that there is not a single entity that is driving arts that's not connected to an educational system really struck me. So looking at education, and also when I was in the Syracuse City School District, arts was a big part of our daily milieu. And, I understand that student performance is really, really important. I understand that money is tight. I also think that we need to prioritize some of these other things because they enrich a child's education. If you look at suburban districts, there's all types of extracurricular activities that enrich the concepts that students are learning in their classrooms. And, having after-school programs and stuff like that is a start. But I also think that we can make a little more concerted effort on peripheral activities that enhance learning in the classroom. So, a perfect example is a person a child that plays soccer. Some of those concepts in soccer are going to bleed into a classroom so that they understand something differently. Finally, I think that, it goes without saying that folks that go on to college gain a broader perspective on their community as opposed to those that don't. Now, I really want to be clear in saying that I don't believe that college is the end all be all for everyone. That's not the path. But what I do believe is that those that get that experience bring a different perspective when they return to their communities. They're more likely to be civically engaged by voting. They're more likely to feel a sense of civic duty or civic responsibility by giving back or reaching out to those that are in need. The last thing is those that have a college education earn more. and they consume more, and they are able to enter the economic pipeline a lot easier than those that don't have a college education. So, I mean, there's, you know, and I could go on and on, Liza, I don't want to do that, but there's a lot that can happen in education.
We'll do a follow-up webinar so we can just keep going with this conversation. Thank you, Amit. Lakey, jumping back to you, working in the construction industry, what are some of the challenges that you've seen with MWBE businesses face as they strive to navigate and access contracting work in the industry? You're on mute. 1 minute.
I said I would like to answer that. I just wanted to, if I could, really quickly, just to address the board thing, because I think it was great. But I also would like to say, don't be afraid to step out your comfort zone and seek other diverse board members. There is, you'll find that these boards, they may have 1 or 2 Black or brown people on their board, but it's the same one in like 5 different ones. You know, 1 person on 8 different boards is not effective. And usually it's because of the process of seeking out new board members. You know, you go to your network, right? Which is usually probably at the very top. And you send through emails and these things of that nature. But however, you know, having a community engagement person on your team or someone to represent your company to go out into the community and network in events and meet new people and other people to kind of diversify your space, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I just wanted to make a point to that, because it's, when you do just see the same person in each space, there's a lot of other talent out there that's untouched and overlooked. And I think it's very important, while we have this time, to encourage companies and decision makers to really think about their the process that they use when they're seeking to fill in, you know, executive roles and new board members, etc. So I just wanted to make sure I put that out there. Back to your question about some of the things that I've observed over the last 1.5 years, particularly that MWBEs face. That is a loaded question, and I don't know if anyone knows, but the governor has, let's just talk about public projects first and foremost, right? So there's a 30% mark that any public project needs to meet, any construction company needs to meet as far as utilization is concerned. And how that's split up, it depends. It could be 15-15, it could be 8-12, whatever minority, and 20% women, it doesn't matter. You have to reach a 30% goal. The issue that we face with this is first certification. That has always been a big problem in the Central New York area, of having state certified MWBE contractors to take advantage of these opportunities, right? And to also help with people who have a role like mine in outreach and getting them to participate on these projects. A lot of that falls under the process and the time that it takes the state to actually to approve an application. But the other end of that, let's talk about those who are certified. They need support services and technical assistance. That's a big area where if they had that support, they can do their work. So a lot of these guys and women you got to think about are small. They're small contractors. They were used to doing smaller projects, you know, less money, residential mostly. And now they're in this space, this new world of where they're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars even, right? And they're actually workers, right? So getting the contracts, getting particularly minority, I can speak to this because that's who I deal with most of the time. And there are some women-owned businesses that I've come across in my experience in doing this. But what I found was with minority contractors, a lot of them are actually the laborers also. You know, they're on site doing the work. So for them to also be the accountant, for them to also be, you know, the person to do the payroll, etc., that's really difficult. It takes them a long time to respond to like emails and get in their change orders. And this is all this technical stuff that they need support in. So it would be great if there was some sort of space of where where they get some sort of administrative support behind them. Because again, getting them to see themselves as business owners as well as workers versus seeing themselves as workers and then a business owner, is one of the most difficult parts that really exists for them. The other thing I would say is financial support, because a lot of these guys, they hire based on contracts. So if there was like a financial institution or a lending resource system that can help give them maybe what we do here, for example, we give sort of like an advance or take a 2% so that they can, get their materials, make their payrolls, etc. But that onus shouldn't only be on a CM. If there was some kind of process where financial institutions can kind of think about how they can come up with some sort of program to support these MWBEs based on a contract basis, and it's not just about their credit history, it's not just about their work history, but there was a guaranteed source of way of where they'll get the institution would get their money back. I don't know what that is and what that looks like. We've just started talking about this and thinking about it, but I know that based on what I've seen over the last year, that would be a great help to a lot of these contractors. And then of course the accountability factor, which I always put out there, it's not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. Everybody has to do their part, right? And so how you say that and direct that to the contractor is one thing, but it's important to be said, crossing your T's and dotting your I's, getting your stuff in on time. A lot of times, sometimes it is about race, sometimes it is about, bigotry and all these other things. They are real and they do exist. But when you get a company where from the head, it says, okay, we want to do this not because we have to, because the governor says so. We want to do this because it's the right thing. That's when things start to take a turn, right? And then you start thinking about how do you work with these MWBEs to help them build capacity and get to where they want to be. So there's some coaching involved there as well. There's some mentorship involved there as well. And this model, I'm sure, could be used in other business spaces can be used in other business spaces. But that is something that we do, and I know some of our peers and other people in the construction network that we're a part of, or and people that do this role have taken on as well. It's kind of a blend of those components. So mentoring, some coaching. You need a lot of patience. You got to have really good direct communication between all the parts, from your project managers to your executive team and even to the contractor. And it's really about being invested in the change. And if that's not there, it'll never work. It'll work at first, but it'll fall apart later. It has to be genuine.
So Liza, if I could jump in, I don't know if you had another question directed at someone. Lakey, all very, very good points. I just wanted to go back to something you mentioned a little while ago, talking about internally what organizations can be doing to stress diversity and inclusion. You mentioned having internal committees. I guess actually Liza shared an article, a reading with me earlier this week, I believe it was, and it just hit on a lot of great points that you don't want to have that in place just to check a box, that it really has to be intentional, and that a lot of companies or some companies may have diversity and inclusion committees that are just there to check a box and to say that they have those in place, but that you really want to be intentional and have metrics in place that you're looking to achieve, that there's a budget in place to do education internally, to do things externally facing. So I think it's a great point. I think it's something that does go a long way with companies, but I just think it needs to have the right intentions and the right support behind it.
I agree. And a question that wasn't asked, but something that we're doing since all of this unfolded, is that internally we are taking steps and measures to do some work. We partnered with Interfaith Works, and we're coming up with a plan on what that would look like. And we're going to survey our employees. We have this whole thing in place where we're looking to kind of shift our own internal culture, because although it's great, it should be a little more diverse. It should be more diverse. Like I said, it's not a question that was asked towards me, but I just wanted to put that out there, because to your point, you're right about the measures, the deliverables that comes out of these type of initiatives within companies are so important. So good intentions, and remember, a lot of good intentions can lead to a path of hell. So you don't want too many good intentions. You want the right one. You want the right ones that fit your company and your company's mission and goal.
Thank you, Lakia. Chayla, you wanted to say something, you can really quickly. I just want to get to the question from Simone on our chat. So go ahead and quickly.
I'll go quick. Yeah, I just wanted to say that people should make sure that their diversity committee or that they put together isn't just the diverse people in that institution. Because the problem is that I found is that you have all the brown or all the people who are within that diversity box left in a room to problematize what is really an institutional problem. So just to make sure that when you're doing this work, that it is indeed intersectional.
Thank you. And just on that topic, Simone, thank you for your question. The question is, how do we hold our institutions accountable to not just providing lip service and statements of diversity, but ensuring that the DEI is integrated within the fabric and actions? I'll open it up to the panel. Not all at once. If not, I will choose someone. Aral, you seem like you're, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the question of lip service is a big thing, because virtual signaling is a big thing right now. Let me just go ahead and say something because it's the right thing to say. And I did my tweet and I said that I believe it. So now I've accomplished my goals, right? So every single organization is going to have different ways that they can serve their client base, right? Am I creating an opportunity? Am I creating an internship? Am I creating a scholarship? Am I doing something to say, you know what, we've done nothing in terms of visibility in a particular area. There's a whole zip code that doesn't probably even know that our organization or company exists. So what can we do about that? Who are the people? And I just would absolutely encourage everyone to lean into CenterState CEO and say, if you're a company, and say, listen, I would love to make whether it's our digital marketing services or our financial services, or we want to do more. What do you recommend? How can we create more visibility? What events are coming up that maybe we can table at? What events are coming up that maybe we can sponsor? What events are coming up that we just may not know about, so that we can have some visibility, so that people know we exist? I think one of the biggest things that blows my mind in a very good way is, as much as I am trying to be involved in a local area, I'm constantly meeting new people. I'm constantly meeting new organizations. Just being on this panel, I've met people that I haven't met before. So the opportunity is there, but if you keep looking in the dark to find your keys, you're not going to find them. You need to figure out how to put a light source on them. So I would encourage everyone to say, okay, what is our primary business? Who do we serve? Where can we do things to be more diverse that we haven't? How do we shine light? How do we create visibility within our company, so that either we're advertising in a certain publication we've not advertised in before, we're attending events. And I can't stress this enough, hopefully, God willingly, outside of virtual, when we go back to in person, if there's an incredible event that's happening that you probably have never been to or know anyone, like, get there. Just physically, sometimes your face being there with your name tag, with your company showing up in a place, is wildly beneficial for that rising tide that can lift all boats. So I would encourage everyone to say, what is our business? What do we do? What are we doing to put ourselves in front of, whether it's a client base, whether it's a vendor base, whether it's a board base, to put ourselves in front of them. If you're like, I'm not sure what to do, it's literally what CenterState CEO is built to do. They have incredible programs that they're putting together. So lean into them. And I think you'll be surprised at the great ideas that can come up. So don't worry about saying, well, I did my tweet, I did my Facebook post, I would never do something bad, so I'm therefore in the right. But ask yourself, what specific action am I taking to create more visibility for my company to these folks, and bringing these people in, maybe from a recruitment, hiring perspective as well. And I think when we do that, we'll see that there's a lot more opportunities that may feel like they don't exist. They exist all the time.
Thank you, Aral. Amid, I'm asking you the same question that Simone asked.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I think I'm going to attempt to be a little provocative here. in that we live in a capitalist society. And I think that to hold these institutions accountable, there are both incentives, but I also think there needs to be some economic consequences. So, for example, the city of Syracuse is now looking at contractors to hire a certain percentage of minority populations to work on whatever projects. I think that's a systemic way of looking at how we're going to provide opportunities to the minority population. I also think that there is some introspection that needs to happen amongst ourselves. Folks hold implicit biases, and if you're not aware of those biases, you're making decisions without knowing that you're marginalizing the community. And I also think that minorities as a consumer can be more thoughtful about where they're going to consume their products and be targeted. That's all I have to offer on that.
Thank you, Amid. Chayla, you mentioned in the chat tangible outcomes. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, I think Amid, really kind of brought that point home, in terms of that. I think something, and I was thinking of Arel and this idea of going out into the community. And there's something my mother always said is that, always be leery of that friend who will always invite you to their home, but will never come to yours. And I think that I live by that, as I'm always looking for, as Arel said, where can I be? Not just in terms of my institution, but I realize that that there are generations coming up behind us who need to see this particular face in a space to know that they can imagine themselves into those roles. So I think that's a tangible thing that we can do, a takeaway that we can do. I'll also then take off one hat and put on another and talk about the Black Leadership Coalition. And I think that there's a symbiotic relationship between, of course, arts, economics, and civic engagement and politics, which means that particularly for this next generation, we really need to be encouraging them to understand, how we can hold people accountable in terms of our economic growth is through the ballot box. So knowing what policies out there are, will hold them accountable in terms of diversity and those percentages that Amid spoke to in terms of hiring and contracts that Lakey spoke to. So I think also making sure that we are civically engaged in holding our candidates accountable to the promises they make.
And that, can I just tag off of that really quickly? Because put on the other hat, like the Powerful Voices app, it's so it's after the process, after the protests, and then after the ballot, it's making civics a lifestyle, and civic education in high need urban communities and rural communities as well, but in high need urban communities will really shift the paradigm. Maybe about 70 to 80%, and there's studies that show this, right? Because it's not taught in our schools. One of the reasons why people like to point at the suburban neighborhoods a lot. And one of the reasons why the suburban neighborhoods, it's not just because it's white, because I live in this suburban neighborhood, right? And so there's Black and suburban too. We tend to get left out a lot of these narratives, but that's for another conversation. But one of the reasons why suburban neighborhoods do so well, and I didn't learn this until I moved to Syracuse, and my daughter, I have two children, my son is 20, my daughter is now 11, but she started kindergarten in the West Hill School District, for example. And my son and myself, we come from city schools out in Westchester and Yonkers, New York, right? So when she started school here, what I noticed right away that was really different was the civic actions that they started very early in class. And that came from not necessarily the school itself, but from the room parents, right? It's the engagement that happens within those communities that make it so successful. And based on the New York State formula, there's not as much money as people think that are flooding to suburban neighborhoods today in 2020 like it used to be. So you need to revisit those. I talk about revisiting those narratives as well to make it fair, because we would actually get more support and we'll build more allies for our community, from outskirt communities. If someone was to take the time and to really look at the policies and the formula that the budget is based on for New York State. So there's a lot going on there, and a lot of homework I think we need to revisit and that needs to take place to really truly build a universal narrative that works for everyone so that everyone can have exactly what they need. But my point, going back to civic education in urban communities, communities, if we start very early educating our children about civics, not necessarily history, U.S. government history, but civic participation and nonpartisan political participation, I really believe that we'll begin to see the change we actually need, because more voices would be heard. You'll have more people interested in running from those communities, run for office. There's so many things that will trickle down out of the process of introducing civics to young people, particularly very early in their life. And it should be a component within, like, the Syracuse City School District, right? So when you're talking about programming, that's a program that should be looked at, because over time, I think it was Aurel or Ami who said, you know, nothing happens overnight. It'll take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. But if you just think about starting that that process very early, 15 to 20 years from now, you know, you would be looking at a totally different Syracuse. And it seems 20 years may sound long, but it's not, because we all see how fast time is going. But I think that's also something very important to think about and to consider. We all need to reimagine and rethink about what all of this work looks like, because nothing is, after COVID and then after George Floyd and the things that have unfolded, nothing is ever going to be the same. So everybody has to go back to the table and rethink about what this looks like. And it's not just one-sided, it's all of us.
Thank you, Lakia. It is 11:59. I want to thank everyone for coming to this webinar. I want to remind you to please follow Generation Next on Facebook, Gen Next 315, and you can email us at generationnext@centerstateceo.com. I want to thank Marcus Webb. He is the person that put everything together. He is our Economic Inclusion Fellow. Marcus, I don't see you, but I know you're in here somewhere. So thank you for putting this conversation together.
Big shout out to Marcus.
Huge shout out to Marcus. And please stay connected with us via our website, CenterStateCEO.com. Or if you know someone, just reach out to us. We have many things coming. Thank you, Krista. Here are some links that can help you stay connected with us. Again, thank you. It is 12 o'clock. I know we have busy schedules, so thank you all. And thank you to the panel. I appreciate each and every one of you.
Have a great day, folks.
Take care.
Thank you, for sure.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye, everybody.